Okay, we'll start with the third session. One more left. And before I start with this third session, I want to mention that last time when I finished with Book 9, I wanted to mention that no matter how many times you read the Iliad, you always find something that makes you reevaluate what you learned earlier. And I forgot to mention, I thought this line was very interesting. This is in Book 9. Remember that up to Book 9, Achilles is still angry. He's upset that the woman Briseis has been taken from him. He's arguing with Agamemnon, saying, look, we're fighting 10 years for a woman, Helen of Troy, and we're here fighting for a woman, so why should mine be taken from me? Don't I love my wife, he says. He refers to her as his wife, although she isn't. Says, don't I love my wife as much as anybody else? So we begin to feel for Achilles. And then at the end of Book 9, when the embassy occurs and everybody leaves, it's time for Achilles to go to bed, and he does. And this is a comment that the narrator makes, which is interesting. But Achilles slept in the inward corner of the strong-built shelter, and a woman lay beside him, one he had taken from Lesbos, Phorbas' daughter, Diomede, of the fair coloring. All the fuss he's made, that you feel for him up to that point, and here he has another woman, and Briseis, well, she's gone, so he has another one in his bed. So now you have to kind of think over and say, is this guy really serious, or is he using this as an excuse? And this happens throughout the Iliad. Something always pops up to make you reevaluate what you've learned up to that point. So that's a comment, just in passing, before I go here. Also, I want to mention that the background that I have on this set of slides is taken from an artist whose works happen to be in Philadelphia. And they built a special room at the Philadelphia Museum to house his paintings. There are 10 of them. Huge paintings like that, that's the room. The artist is Cy Twombly, and he calls this work 50 Days at Ilium. I think I spelled Ilium the way it's supposed to be, but that's not how he spells it. He puts an A where the U is, because he wants to emphasize Achilles. So he calls it Ilium. And the 50 days are what we're discussing right now, the last 53 days in the 9th year. But this is a nice work. He's a contemporary artist, and most people don't like contemporary art. They look like kindergartners or scribbles, as you can see. But it's a very famous work, and it is in Philadelphia, these 10 paintings. And I use them here as my background, as you can see on my slides. That's part of one of his paintings at Ilium. Very interesting. Okay, we're in Book 10. I divided it in 3 parts, or it falls into 3 parts. They're not really my divisions. I come up with those divisions, but there's a reason for them. It's not just arbitrarily dividing it. There has to be something there that lets you divide them in the way that I have. And again, I have the percentages to see where the emphasis goes, where the author puts the emphasis. This book, called the Book of Dolon, is the most controversial book in the Iliad, because since ancient times, the Byzantine scholars, there were 3 of them that were very important in putting the Iliad together, decided that this book cannot belong to the true Iliad. And since that time, up to today, there's a great deal of controversy about this book. And now we're divided. Half of the scholars say it is part of the Iliad, and another half say it's not. It's a book that comes almost in the middle of the Iliad, and for the first time there's a night raid. You don't have night raids in the Iliad, you have only day battles. So it's unusual because of that. It's also unusual because the dress of these people in this book is quite different from the dress that you find in the other books. So those are the negative. The positive things are that a night raid has to have special dress because you can't wear armor. It will shine if there's any light or any fires and give them away. It's clanky. They're using the bow and arrow because it's much quieter to kill somebody at night with a bow and arrow than have a duel. So there are a lot of positive parts to it. It's also interesting, I'm on the camp that says it belongs with the Iliad for various reasons, and I make a case in my book about Iliad 10 that it does belong in the Iliad. The whole idea is up to this point, the Greeks have been losing. They've been losing so badly that they had to go to Achilles and offer him gifts, hoping that he'll come back. He says no, he's not going to come back. So now the Greeks are in a very dire situation. The Trojans have just about reached the wall, the gates of the wall. If they can break through, they can set fire to the Greek ships. So this is a respite from all that. Since the Greek have been losing, Book 10 is going to show that they're still the best warriors, that they're still on top. And it's a break from the battle that has been going up to this point. So we begin with consuls. A consul at the beginning from the gods deciding that Zeus is going to take a vacation. He thinks he's done his job. He's brought the Trojans to the point where they're winning, so he kept his word to Thetis, Achilles' mother, and he can leave things alone and he can go away and merely enjoy himself, which is another theme in the Iliad, that the gods really don't care that much about people. For them, this is a sports game. It's like watching a football game on television for them. So Zeus goes to a high mountain near Olympus to watch what's happening below. And he tells the other gods to stay out of the fighting. So while he's doing this, the Greeks decide, or rather Hera, Zeus's wife, decides that maybe this is a good opportunity for her to do something for the Greeks. She's going to help them while Zeus is away, although she's not supposed to. And so that's what happens at the beginning here. And it also shows something else that's important in the Iliad, and that is the way Homer talks about events that occur simultaneously but have to be narrated separately, concurrently. It's called Zelinsky's law, who was the scholar that came up with this. So when you're reading, when it says at the same time that the gods are having a consul, so is Hector on the Trojan side having a consul. These things are happening simultaneously, but of course they have to be narrated separately. And sometimes, if you're not aware of this, it seems a bit unusual, because Homer says something before it actually happens as far as you're concerned, but you have to keep in mind it's happening at the same time. So we come up with Zelinsky's law here, which will be part of the Iliad as you go on to the other books. The important part in this particular book is that another myth, another theme that comes up often, and that's the theme of force that I mentioned before, vios, force versus metis, intelligence. That keeps coming up in various books of the Iliad. And in the second part there, where they decide who is going to go on this spy mission, there are many Greeks that are volunteering. The first one that they think should be part of it is Diomedes, the warrior that you met in Book 5, who had the aristia, the excellence, the great fighter. And he's told to select a partner. And many people volunteer, but he selects Odysseus. And there's a reason for that, but it comes, the thing that I'm talking about, force, represented by Diomedes, also is in need of intelligence, which is represented by Odysseus. So here again, it's force with intelligence that is going to win the day. If you have those two things operating together, you can get somewhere. And that's what we see here. These two men go into the Trojan camp. At the same time, concurrently, the Trojans are sending a spy to the Greek camp. And they meet somewhere in between. The spy for the Trojans is a man called Dolon. He appears only here and then disappears from the Iliad because he's killed. And there's some controversy here the way he's killed. For example, Odysseus and Diomedes see him immediately when they start on their spy mission. And they corner him. And they catch him. And they tell him, tell us what's going on in your camp and we'll let you live. Well, Dolon spills his guts. He's a coward to begin with. And the moment he says everything, they decapitate him. That's a bit crude and rude of Odysseus and Diomedes. But that's questionable. A warrior shouldn't really do that. Once you give your word, as you'll see with other warriors throughout the Iliad, one of them comes up in a later book to show you the way a warrior should really act. It's out of character. But here it's necessary. So Odysseus and Diomedes spy. They really don't find out anything of importance because they go off on a tangent. They discover that another Trojan ally, which is another myth that is introduced here, King Rhesus is his name. And although Homer doesn't go into it much, there was a myth that would be known to the audience that King Rhesus, whenever he came to Troy, which is now, he comes in the 9th or 10th year, and if his horses and he drank from this commander, the river that runs through Troy, the Trojans would win with him. There are all kinds of myths that tell us how Troy would come up on top, or how the Greeks would come on top. If Philoctetes, a Greek warrior, brought his bow to Greece, to Troy, the Greeks would win the war. If they built a Trojan horse, the Greeks would win. If they did something else, somebody else, if they stole the Palladium, which is a statue of Athena from Troy, Troy would fall. If King Rhesus drank from this water, the Trojans would win. And it goes on and on with various myths. Well, they discover that Rhesus has just come to Troy. And instead of going after their mission, which is to find out what the Trojans are up to, they decide to get rid of Rhesus, which they do. They kill him and 13 of his companions. They take his horses, which are very special. They take his chariot, which is gold, and they come back to the camp with a lot of good booty. So that's what the Dolonia, the book of Dolon, is all about. But it has its purpose. It does give you a break from the battles that occur before this. It does show Greek intelligence and how eventually they are going to win because they're willing to do the kind of things that they do in this particular book. And then when you come to Book 11, Book 11 is called the Woundings. That is, we're now going to start getting rid of our major characters to give space to Achilles for his excellence, which is to come later on. So this book which goes by the name of Agamemnon's Odyssea, because it emphasizes Agamemnon's greatness in war, is actually a book that is going to show us Agamemnon is going to get wounded and leave. Diomedes will get wounded, Odysseus will get wounded, Nestor will get wounded, and there you already eliminate 4 or 5 major characters to make way for Achilles and Hector later on. But the book is interesting because of the psychology that it gives concerning these particular characters, especially Agamemnon. And that's what I want to emphasize, since I can't go through everything. But from this point on, you're going to have 11 and 12 that it's going to eliminate many warriors. Then you're going to have books 13, 14, and 15, which are going to be a digression away from the battle. Homer does this often again because he wants to extend the story as much as he can. So he has to show you that things happen that interrupt the battle. And then you're going to come to the major book, 16, which is the first major death, which will be Patroclus, the friend of Achilles, which will change the theme of the Iliad from one of wrath to one of revenge. And then it's going to also tell us about Nestor, who also is going to leave, not because he's wounded, but because he is going to try and help somebody else that's wounded. So he'll be eliminated. But the interesting thing is, if you go to, let me go to 11 here, and give you a few of the passages, especially similes. In these books from 11 to 24, you get the majority of the similes. And in understanding Homer's Iliad, you have to look at the similes very carefully, because the similes tell you how you are to interpret these characters at the same time that they give you relief from the constant battling that is going on, especially in these later books. Book 11 begins the third major battle. And this major battle, which lasts one day, day 26 of the Iliad, is going to go on till book 18. So from 11 to 18, it's one battle. And during this battle, you're going to lose many of these popular characters. And it's interesting that even though there's as much fighting as there is, and even though the Trojans are gaining the upper hand, by the end of the Iliad, you're going to have something like 271 Trojans are going to die, major characters. We're only concerned with major characters, to about 40 Greeks. So you can see the difference. Only 40 major Greek characters lose their lives, but 271 major Trojans lose their life. So what we have in 11, first you're going to have an arming scene. That is, how does a warrior arm himself? This is a type scene. Every time a warrior arms, they do it the same way. You start from the bottom and work up. You put on your shoes first and then you come up. The last thing you take in your hand is a spear. And that becomes important. Why, when Patroclus arms himself, why doesn't he take the spear? Well, the spear that he's supposed to take is Achilles' spear, because he's putting on Achilles' armor to pretend he's Achilles. But it's a spear that's divine. And it shows you that a mortal cannot really handle immortal armor, which tells you that he's not going to make it. He's going to die. Plus the fact that if he puts on Achilles' armor, he becomes a surrogate of Achilles. And when he dies, it's a premonition that Achilles dies, because he's wearing his armor. And then Hector takes that armor and he puts it on, but it's still Achilles' armor. So it means he's going to die. And if he dies, Achilles will die. It's all set up in that way. So in 11, in book 11, you have one of the first similes about Agamemnon's fighting, and it says here, this is on page 256, and as a lion seizes the innocent young of the running deer, and easily crunches and breaks them, caught in the strong teeth, when he has invaded their lair, and rips out the soft heart from them, and even if the doe be very near, still she has no strength to help, for the ghastly shivers of fear are upon her also, and suddenly she dashes away through the glades and the timber, sweating in her speed away from the pounds of the strong beast. So there was no one of the Trojans who could save these two from death, but they themselves were running in fear from the Argives. The interesting thing there is that the warriors are mostly seen in the form of some major animal. The lion is the king of beasts. There are more than 40 similes that have to do with the lion. So at the very top of the strength of a warrior is to be called a lion. So Agamemnon too is, and as a lion seizes the innocent. But look at what he seizes. A lion should be paired with something equal to that, a tiger, a bull, but not Agamemnon. And as a lion seizes the innocent young of the running deer, not even the deer itself, but the doe. So what equality is there between a lion and a doe? So Agamemnon is a great warrior only when he goes after things that are inferior to him. That's what Homer's telling you there. So in a way he's putting him down, because he goes after the young. And then the anger, the way he does it, he's going to crunch him to death, says something about his character. Earlier I mentioned to you how when he came across someone that his brother wanted to let go free, he says, no, kill even the innocent, kill even the unborn. So that brings out his character. But his character is also brought out by his accoutrements. And that's the second thing that I had here, I think. Yeah, when he's dressing, he takes up a shield. And it says, this is on the shield, encircled in the midst of all was the blank-eyed face of the Gorgon. The Gorgon is someone that when you come face to face with, you turn into stone. Medusa is a Gorgon. Encircled in the midst of all was the blank-eyed face of the Gorgon, with her stare of horror and fear was inscribed upon it, and terror. So what's on the shield also says something about the person that holds it, as you'll see later on when we discuss Achilles' shield and what's on that. So what they wear, what they hold, the way they hold it, the things that are said about them in the similes, all bring out the character of the person that is being spoken about. So that's what you have in most of this book when we talk about Agamemnon. When you come to Diomedes and Odysseus, the emphasis is the fact that they're going to get wounded. And it's interesting that Diomedes, who up to now is again a surrogate of Achilles, because he is the perfect warrior and the way a warrior should fight, to compare him with Achilles and what has happened to him in the meantime, when he does get wounded, he is wounded with an arrow at his heel, which also reminds you of Achilles, because the myth is that Achilles, when he does die, is hit in his vulnerable spot, his heel, and he dies. Now, Homer doesn't make much of this, because if he does, if he emphasizes that myth, then why should he be wearing armor? Why do we have to go all the trouble of making him armor? So you can't use that story for Achilles, because he's a mortal in divine armor. But you can see that the idea that's there, that the audience would be aware of, is in the mind Homer, in order to suggest here who Diomedes really is and who she's standing in for. So both of those characters now get wounded and they'll sit out the war. Nestor sees somebody that's having a problem on the battlefield. It's somebody he knows. This somebody gets wounded. He goes with his chariot to pick him up and take him off the battlefield. So he goes off the battlefield also. Book 12 is the center book. There are 24 books in the Iliad. Now it's the center. And because it's the center, this is called Tihomachia, which means the battle at the wall. The Trojans had reached the wall, the Greek wall. And this is a crisis book. We're at a crisis now. They're ready to break down the wall. The god is with them. Zeus is helping Hector because he promised Thetis. He promised Thetis that he will help Hector put fire to the first ship, after which he'll leave them. That's his promise, and that's what he's trying to do. And he said that he's going to let Hector win until the sun goes down on the 26th day. Well, Hera is just waiting for her husband to go away so she can end the day early. Something she can do, because Zeus didn't say when the day ends. He says at the end of the day. So she can end it at 4 o'clock instead of later, as she does at some point. So that's what we have in 12. You have the introduction first, and then the Trojans preparing for their attack, and then a number of characters who try to breach the wall, to break it down, but mostly Hector. And notice how the story is split. When Hector tries the wall, Homer brings it to a certain point where it's almost complete, and then he interrupts and goes to something else to keep his audience interested. And then he'll later return at the last number there, Hector's second assault on the wall, to finish his story. That happens often throughout. It's a trick that many authors use, especially those that serialize their narratives. You serialize up to a certain point and have the audience waiting to see what's going to happen next. Since this was an oral society where they sang these songs, this is a good gimmick to get your audience back again to see what's going to happen. So this is the crisis. There's an interesting passage in here that tells you something about the warrior society, and that's between two warriors, two Trojan warriors, Sarpedon, who is the son of Zeus, and a major character from this point to the end, because Patroclus is going to kill him. And Patroclus has to kill somebody of importance to be killed by somebody of importance, by Hector, who will be killed by Achilles. And those are the only deaths that occur at a high level: Sarpedon, Patroclus, Hector. So in this book, book 12, let me get the number here, 310. Sarpedon meets Glaucus. As I said, they're both Trojan soldiers. They know each other, and they meet in the field, and they're talking to each other, and they're saying, why do we receive such attention from everybody, like football players? Why do we get the big bucks? What is it that we do? And it's because we fight for others, and we want to get honor for ourselves and for our country. And Sarpedon says to Glaucus at one point, Glaucus, why is it you and I are honored before others with pride of place, the choice meats, and the filled wine cups at Lycia, or Lycia, which is their country, and all men look on us as if we were immortals. And we are appointed a great piece of land by the banks of Xanthus, good land, orchard and vineyard, and plow land, and the planting of wheat. Therefore, it is our duty in the forefront of the Lycians to take our stand and bear out our part of the blazing of battle. We get paid for all this, and that's our duty, to fight. And then after some other things he says, finally, man, supposing you and I, escaping this battle, would be able to live on forever, ageless and immortal, so neither would I myself go on fighting in the foremost, nor would I urge you into the fighting where men win glory. But now, seeing that the spirits of death stand close about us in their thousands, no man can turn aside nor escape them. Let us go and win glory for ourselves or yield it to others. And that's the warrior code that Achilles is fighting under, and all of these warriors are. Their job is to win glory, and if they can't win it for themselves, then they can at least win it for their opponent, who is also a warrior that is operating under the same code. And that's why he says we're honored and what we get paid and are given all these special things. And that's something that you have to keep in mind now in Book 12 as you go on towards the end. This is the warrior code that Achilles is trying to understand, that he's been working under and has been broken up to this moment. And he doesn't understand how he can go on fighting. And of course, he knows something that nobody else, no other warrior knows. He knows that if he fights, he's going to die. It's fated. The other warriors might die, but they're not fated, or they don't know about it. So they have hope. Achilles doesn't have hope. That's the big difference. He knows the result if he does what he's doing. So no wonder he has to question it, because it makes a great deal of difference to him. Now when we go on to 13, this is called Battle by the Ships. The Trojans will break through the wall, and they're going to reach the ships. Remember that Zeus is gone now. He takes a break, which gives Poseidon, his brother, an opportunity to help the Greeks. Poseidon is with the Greeks. Why is he with the Greeks? Because he's been jilted by the Trojans. So you see again that everybody has a purpose. It's not that he honors the Greeks more. It's not because he thinks their cause is more just than others. It's because of what has been done to him. Poseidon did not get paid for building the walls of Troy. So he's mad at the Trojans, and he's going to fight them. And this gives him an opportunity. Also, Poseidon, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the god of the underworld, that is Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto in Latin, but we're using the Greek names for the gods here, are three brothers. And the universe was divided among the three. Homer talks about this. Zeus takes the sky. Poseidon takes the sea. Hades takes the underworld. So why is Zeus doing so much on the earth and taking such liberties when all three brothers had the earth in common? It's not Zeus's area. Zeus has to be in the sky. So Poseidon is upset about this. Why isn't he in on this? Why is Zeus controlling things? And when he gets a chance to go against his brother, he'll do it. But it also shows you on a divine level what's operating on a mortal level. Because the same things that are going on the divine level are going on the mortal level. That is, Poseidon, let's say like Achilles, is arguing with a superior, Zeus, like Achilles is arguing with Agamemnon. But look at the way that Poseidon and Zeus are going to handle their anger, and the way Achilles and Agamemnon handle it. In a way, it's an example to show you the right way and the wrong way. Poseidon is not going to fight Zeus. He's clever enough to know that that's not going to bring out the desired results. Achilles doesn't do that. He does go against his superior and causes all these deaths throughout the Iliad. So there are always these examples showing you the immortal level and the mortal level and how things are handled. So when Zeus goes away, Poseidon gets his chance to do something. It's interesting that Poseidon does this because Zeus here is the older brother, but he's also the youngest brother, which is unusual. How can he be the youngest and the oldest at the same time? Well, he's the oldest because he was born first. No, he was born last. He was the youngest. And he was born last because as his siblings were being born, they were being swallowed by his father, Kronos. And his wife, Rhea, Kronos' wife, by the time she had her last child, decided, I can't lose all my children. So she hid Zeus, her youngest, and gave the father a rock with swaddling clothes, and he swallowed the rock thinking he was the last born. So Zeus was saved. Now once he was saved, and he grew up, he came back, he killed his father, and before killing his father, the father regurgitated all the children, so he becomes the oldest, because he's already there, and the others are being reborn. So he's the oldest and the youngest at the same time. Well, Poseidon sees it differently. He says, this is my young brother, and he's doing all these things. But he's also his oldest brother, so you can't really argue. That's happening throughout. And then we focus on Idomeneus, who is another Greek leader from Crete, the king of Crete. And we go through his excellence. Every warrior gets a section of a book or a whole book to show their excellence, to show their what they can do. What's interesting here is again there's another passage that I had here that's between Idomeneus and his sidekick Meriones, which emphasizes in this case the shamelessness that these warriors feel if they can't be in the battlefield or if they can't be doing what the warrior code says they should be doing. Let me see if I have that reference. That's on page 298. Okay. What happens in this case, Idomeneus is at his camp getting equipment, and he meets his sidekick Meriones, who was in the battle. His spear broke, and he's rushing out to get a new one to re-enter the battle. But they both meet outside the battlefield just before they re-enter it. So Idomeneus is now speaking to Meriones, and he says, then Idomeneus, lord of the Cretans, answered him in turn. He says to Meriones, you will find one spear and 20 spears if you want them. He says, instead of rushing to your own camp to get a spear, just go to my camp, which is closer, and you'll find one, and 20 others if you want it. Well, that's telling him that, look at how many people I've killed. I've collected 20. It says something about himself. what we should think about him. You will find 1 spear and 20, if you want them, standing against the shining inward wall in my shelter. Trojan spears I win from men that I killed, for my way is not to fight my battles standing far away from my enemies. He's trying to justify, why are you here and not on the battlefield? Nobody asked him anything, but he's thinking that the other one might be thinking that. Why are you here when the rest of us are fighting? Thereby I have spears there, and shields massed in the middle, and helms and corslets are there, in all the pride of their shining. Meriones, the other guy, a thoughtful man, spoke to him in answer. For me also, beside my shelter and beside my black ship, there are many spoils from the Trojans. So that's why he might be asked, why are you running away from the battlefield? He says, I've killed a lot of them also, but not near for me to get them. For I tell you, neither am I one who has forgotten his war strength, but among the foremost along the fighting for men win glory, I take my stand. Whenever the quarrel of battle arises, let my fighting be forgotten by some other bronze-armored Achaean. You are the very one I think must know of it. You know the kind of person I am, the kind of warrior. So they're all interested in making sure that the other one understands that they're not standing outside of the battlefield because they're cowards, but there's a reason for it. They're just getting more equipment, and they want to show their excellence, what they've done, by telling us how many spears they've conquered, etc. That happens often throughout. So it shows you what kind of a shame culture this is. These warriors have this code that they live under, that they follow, because they don't want to feel shame in front of their people, and all the other reasons I talked about besides, because of what they can get, etc. There's a lot of similes in these books. For example, this book has as many as 25 just in one book. And the reason for this is because now we're into heavy fighting. As I said, from book 11 to 18, you have constant fighting. And it has to be broken up by these little vignettes that I'm talking about to get you out of the battle. And also the similes help to get you away into a peacetime world, and to contrast a peacetime world with a world at war. So you have a back and forth here. When we go to the other book, 14, which is called the Deception of Zeus, this is where Hera now decides, the wife of Zeus, what can she do to get Zeus out of the way so she can do something for the Greeks? Again, why is she so concerned about the Greeks? Because she lost the beauty contest to the Trojans. So she has a purpose. She hates them because of that, and she says so. How could they have chosen Aphrodite over her? And Athena is the same. So she wants to deceive Zeus. So she decides that she's going to have sex with Zeus. And then she's going to put him to sleep, and while he's asleep, she's going to help the Greeks. Now again, in telling her story, Homer follows type scenes, always type scenes. The important type scene for somebody that's going to do battle, whether it's going to battle sexually with Zeus or whether you're going to do it on the field, you follow a certain procedure. First you arm. You have to put on your armor. And then you go out with your spears and anything else you have to do the fighting. So how are we going to handle this with Hera? Well, the same way. She's going to arm. She puts on a robe made by Athena. That's her armor. She's going to put on the things that she needs to fight with, which are the charms, love charms that she needs to conquer Zeus. So she goes to Aphrodite. and she asks for love charms. But Aphrodite is on the opposite camp. So she has to be very sly. So she makes up a lie. She says she's going to visit some relatives from the generation before her who took care of her as a child. They're having a trouble as a couple, and she's going to go and see what she can do. And she wants to have some of the charms that might help her along. Aphrodite, after all, Hera is her superior, says, okay, I'll give you what I can. She does, and she arms herself with this. And then she goes and finds sleep, a personification of sleep. Everything is concrete, remember, in an oral society. There is no abstractions. Sleep has to be something solid. So she finds sleep. Again, I'm saying this because the stories that are being used here are identical to what's going on the Achilles level. Sleep is going to refuse her. Says, I can't go against Zeus. He can destroy me if he finds out I put him to sleep when he should be awake. So Hera says, I'll give you gifts. Remember gifts and Achilles and the gifts. He says, no, it's not worth it. So Hera says, I'll give you one of the beautiful graces, pacify. He says, I'll take it. Which now takes you back to Paris and Helen and Briseis and Briseis. In all these levels, whether they're mortal or immortal, there's a way to them, and it's usually through a woman. So he's going to put Zeus to sleep in order to get the grace pacify. And he can't wait till he gets pacify as his wife. So he puts Zeus to sleep after Hera meets him, and they sleep together. She wants to get him someplace where he can't get away, but he refuses. He says, I'll fashion a cloud. Nobody will be able to see us. It'll be fine. So they do that. Now, while he's asleep, Poseidon has his opportunity. And he decides this is the time he can help the Greeks. And he starts doing that. That's why at the end here, number 3 is Poseidon's intervention, which is 32% of the book. It's also at this point another book with a lot of similes here. We begin to see that Hector at this point is becoming very hubristic. That is, hubris. He thinks because he's winning that he is really more than he should be. Power corrupts. That's another thing that you see in the Iliad. It's going to happen with Patroclus. It happens with Hector. It happens with all of them. Once they start winning, they think they can do more than they really can. Hector is at the point where he feels he's on top of the world. The gods are with him. They're helping him. He doesn't know that Zeus is really carrying out a promise he made to Thetis. And once he fulfills that promise, he's going to stop. Hector thinks, he even says himself, I should be the son of Zeus because he loves me so much to allow me all of this. So he goes ahead doing more and more. And again, there's another character, Trojan, who comes into the picture. His name is Polydamas, who is an alter ego of Hector, because he's an advisor. He's a Trojan advisor, and he keeps telling Hector at certain points, perhaps you should think about this. Do you really want to pursue this? Or should you stop, go back to Troy, think about it, and then come back again? Well, once Hector is winning, he doesn't want to hear anything. So again, here we have force via Hector being advised by Metis' intelligence, and in this case, he refused to take it, and as a result, he's going to lose. So again, this theme comes up. It's constant, force versus intelligence. You need both combined in order to be successful. If you don't have one, you're going to lose out. And it's a theme that Homer keeps bringing back over and over again. and it starts here. So Hera does this. Zeus is out of the picture, and he's going to be out of the picture till book 15. When he wakes up and he sees what's going on below, he gets upset, and then he orders all the gods to stay out of the battle completely, or else they will be punished by him. And then you get myths of how in the past they were punished and what happened. And so we get an idea of his power. He says at one point, which other authors since have used, that he is a golden chain that he holds at the very top. And below the golden chain is everything else. Is the earth, is man, beast, plant life. And all he has to do is just pull his golden chain and everything below it follows. That's how powerful he is. It's called the golden chain that later English writers have used in their poetry. The golden chain of being. So that comes here in book 14. Then when we come to 15, which is where he wakes up, book 15 is the counterattack beside the ships, is the name that was given in ancient times to this book. So we have Zeus awakes at the beginning, then Hector assisted by Apollo counterattacks, because when Zeus wakes up, he now says, I promised Thetis that Hector is going to win till the sun sets. And so nobody will interfere. And he sends Apollo as his emissary to tell Hector, go ahead, set fire to the ships. You have till the end of the day to do this. So this is where Apollo comes in. And then it goes on with Hector assisted by Zeus leads the Trojans against the Ajax-led Greeks. And there's some kind of animosity between Hector and Ajax. That's another theme that you find in the Iliad. Ever since book 7, where Hector and Ajax dueled together, and Ajax came on top, but nothing came of it, there's been something gnawing at Hector that he should do something about it. And throughout these books, they're always trying to get at each other. And it's a theme that Homer follows throughout by giving you a little bit at a time and coming back to it periodically. And it's really not resolved till book 15, when Hector and Ajax do meet, and Hector throws a rock at Hector, which puts him out of the war for a while. Nothing happens to him because nothing can happen to Hector. That's something that Achilles can only do. So you have that story going on. You have all these various vignettes going on, all these various little stories operating at the same time, none of which is ever completed. It's carried to a certain point, stopped, picks up another thread of another story, and he comes eventually back to the previous ones. That way you're always curious what's happening, what's going to happen next, and it goes on that way throughout. Another thing that's, there's another simile here that becomes, that's very important. Let me see where that is, on page 340, that follows the theme that we've come several times before, and that is that nothing mortal is permanent. Everything ends. And there are various ways of expressing this. And Homer does do this throughout the Iliad. In this particular simile, which is very interesting, let's see. Maybe I don't have the 360. 360. Oh, okay. It's here. Apollo standing in front, I'm just paraphrasing here, standing in front of the Greeks, the Trojans, who he's helping to break down the wall, wrecked the bastions of the Achaeans. He's knocking down the wall for them. And this is the interesting part. He does so easily as when a little boy piles sand by the seashore, when in his innocent play he makes sand towers to amuse him, and then, still playing with hands and feet, ruins them and wrecks them. So you, Lord Apollo, piled in confusion much hard work and painful done by the Argives, and drove terror among them. He can knock down man-made structures like this wall, like a little child knocks down a sandcastle, which shows you that nothing is permanent that is mortal. You've come to this before, when Poseidon gets upset at building the walls of Troy and complains to Zeus and says, the Greeks are building this massive wall. What's going to happen to mine in years to come? It will be thought of secondary, and the Greeks will take all the pride and importance. And Zeus says, don't be silly. Once the war is over, just knock it down and bring the sea over it and wash it away. Nobody will ever know it existed. And now Apollo says the same thing. He can knock down this man-made structure as easily as a child plays with a sandcastle. Another theme, and you can pick out these things, but how many times they're repeated in various ways through these similes. And that's what the similes are important, why they're important. Also, another thing that mortality versus immortality. What do the gods think of man? And you get all kinds of comments throughout. I can go for a moment ahead because this is an interesting passage. In turn, Zeus, who gathers the clouds, spoke to him in answer. He's talking to one of the gods. You have seen Shaker of the earth, that's Poseidon, because he's also the god of earthquakes. You have seen Shaker of the earth, the counsel within me, and why I gather you. I think of these men, though they are dying, even so I shall stay here upon the fold of Olympus, sitting still, watching to pleasure my heart. I think of people, but they're not all that important. It's more important for me to sit here and watch them like I do a football game, just as entertainment. So it shows you the attitude of immortals to mortals as far as Homer is concerned. And this happens again often. Here's another small passage. In turn, the Lord who strikes from afar, Apollo, answered him. Shaker of the earth. Again, he's talking to Poseidon. Apollo is talking to his uncle Poseidon. Shaker of the earth, you would have me be as one without prudence if I'm to fight even you for the sake of insignificant mortals, who are as leaves are, and now flourish and grow warm with life, and feed on what the ground gives, but then again fade away and are dead. Why should we argue, he's saying to his uncle. It's at a point where the gods want to take sides and want to fight each other. He says, why should we fight for insignificant mortals? They're just like leaves. They fall off the tree and new leaves grow. So why bother? And that's an attitude that's followed throughout the Iliad. And again, you get many such quotations throughout. Now, after 15, we come to a very crucial book, 16, which is the death of Patroclus, finally. We come to a point where Achilles is standing by his tent, watching the battle from afar, and he sees a chariot coming by with a wounded man in it. And he knows it's a Greek chariot because he recognizes Nestor. Remember Nestor in the previous book in 11, where he goes to save somebody. Now all of a sudden in 16, we're going back to that incident in 11, and something happens simultaneously, but you're not being reported of that simultaneous action till 16. And it's Achilles looking, and he wants to know who is that wounded man. And he turns to Patroclus and says, can you find out? Which shows Achilles is concerned. He's sitting out the war, but he is concerned what's going on. He sees the Greeks are losing. So Patroclus goes to find out who the wounded man is. He leaves now to find out, and he's not going to come back for quite a while because he's going to be detained. So Achilles isn't going to find till later. But when he does come back and tells Achilles what's going on, he begs Achilles to allow him to use his armor so that the Trojans will think it's Achilles coming back and they might be frightened. And this has been put into his head to ask this by Nestor, who is very wise and talks to Patroclus, says, why don't you go and do this? And so Achilles agrees. He says, all right, but all I want you to do is stand in the battlefield so they'll see you, they'll think it's me, but don't do anything more. And he says, again, you see the warrior quote coming out and how selfish in a way they are. Don't do much more because you're taking honor away from me. If you should advance and you should be lucky enough to do something great, you're taking it away from me. I should be doing it. All I want you to do is wear my armor, let the Trojans get scared, and then come back. And that's all you're to do. But, as I said before, power corrupts, just like with Hector. So once Patroclus puts on this divine armor, and he starts killing people, and Trojans are running away, he wants to conquer Troy. He wants to go to the walls of Troy. And he's struck down because he's not the one that's supposed to win Troy. The story has to go on, so he has to be gotten rid of. And that's where Hector comes in. But before Patroclus can be killed, we have to see Patroclus do something great to show what he's doing. And what he does is fight Sarpedon. Sarpedon is the son of Zeus, which brings in something else into the story. If he is the son of Zeus, why can't Zeus save his own son, being the king of the gods? And we find out, as far as Homer's concerned, that fate is beyond the gods. They don't control fate. Fate is separate. And although Zeus has the power to change fate if he wants to, he will throw the world into chaos if he does. And the other gods don't allow him. There's a conversation on Olympus that they have, and they each say, we each have sons fighting. Aphrodite has Aeneas. Eris has 2 sons. They each have. If you can do it, why can't we save our sons? So Zeus says, yeah, I can't change fate. I have to let it go. So he's going to allow his son to get killed. Now other things come into the picture. When a warrior is killed, the thing is to strip him of his armor, because the armor is costly and it's more booty that they can collect. But the body has to be preserved, and usually the greater fighting is over the body. And you can see here why that would be important. If Patroclus' body, for example, can be taken by the Trojans, it can be used for ransom. and it will destroy the narrative. They can exchange him for something else that should not be exchanged. For example, when Hector gets killed, if the body is ransomed later on, we can continue with the story the way it's supposed to go. So that's a consideration. It's also a great sin to let the body go to the enemy, because for one thing, it's going to cost a lot of money. The greater the warriors, the more money they're going to ask for him. So there are always great fights over the bodies. Now with Sarpedon, since Zeus does have some control, he merely miraculously takes the body off the field. Nobody knows where it went, and he sends it back home. But Hector, not Hector, Patroclus has killed a major warrior, and so he's next. And when they come finally across Patroclus' death, comes number 4 here. When he comes across Hector, the interesting thing there is that Hector does kill Patroclus, but it's Apollo that gets the first shot. And again, that's important because it's what will happen later on to Achilles. Achilles, not in the Iliad, is going to be killed because of Apollo. Hector, in this work, in the Iliad, is going to be killed by Athena and by a young man, I'm trying to think, his name is Euphorbus. There's a parallel that I'm trying to get to that is set up here, that all these great warriors, because they become the surrogates of Achilles, are going to have the same pattern in their killing. It's going to be a god and a mortal that brings about their death. And it happens in each case the same way. So when Patroclus is killed, Apollo strikes him first, and then a little known character who only appears in this particular book, Euphorbus, is going to strike Patroclus, and then Hector is going to be the third that finally gives him the final blow. But because Apollo and Euphorbus, a divine being and a mortal, are the first, that's the pattern you're going to see with the other main deaths also. And it also gives more emphasis to Patroclus, that Hector cannot really kill him on his own. He needs a god's help. Just like when Achilles is going to finally destroy Hector, kill Hector in the last book, it's going to be Athena that is dressed as Hector's brother and is standing next to him. And the moment he turns, Hector turns to his brother, he says, okay, give me a sword. He's not there anymore. Athena disappears. So it's Athena that leads him to Achilles. They can't do it on their own. They need a god's help. So this is what we get in book 16, the death of Patroclus, the way the death occurs. And after this, it's a crucial book because it changes the theme. Now all of a sudden, there's no longer an emphasis on the anger of Achilles. The emphasis is on the revenge that he wants to take because of his best friend has been killed. And that's what we have here. When we go to the following book, this is 17, now we're going to have a whole book devoted to retrieving the body of Patroclus. You cannot leave the body there. There's going to be a battle over the corpse, as you see in part 1. Then you get a very light interruption, intermezzo, on Achilles' horses, and then we go back again to retrieving the corpse. That's how Homer always breaks things up. He never, as I said, continues with a particular scene clear through. He interrupts it somehow. The intermezzo is interesting because for the first time, Homer goes into surrealism. And it's interesting that the Iliad, you have two of the most important movements in the 20th century, existentialism and surrealism. And they appear first 2,700 years ago in Homer. Achilles is the perfect existential hero who knows he's going to die. He knows what he's doing is going to bring his death, and yet he continues. The symbol of the existentialists in the 20th century was the myth of Sisyphus, where this mythical character has a rock in Hades that he has to roll up this hill, and when he gets to the top, it rolls back down, and then he starts again rolling it up. So what's the purpose? If it's going to roll down again, why do you roll it up? Well, that's his duty. That's existentialism. You do it because it's there, you just do it. And that's what you have with Achilles. Here now, in intermezzo, you have surrealism. Why? Because the horses talk for the first time. They give their view, and Zeus says, it was a mistake for me to give you these horses to mortals. You're divine horses, and mortals aren't worth it. There you get the view of the gods again. You shouldn't be suffering for these people that are just around and they're going to disappear. So you get this little light passage, and you get it. Most of the passages on Olympus are very light, because it shows that the gods are doing the same thing that people are doing, but for the gods it doesn't matter, because things go right back where they were before. No matter how much they argue, no matter how mad they are, they're immortal. They'll make up and they'll sit around drinking. They always end up drinking on Olympus. But people can't do that. They suffer. So you get this difference happening. And then you go back to Patroclus. They fight for the whole book to get the body back. Hector gets the armor, as he's supposed to, because he's going to wear now the divine armor that Patroclus was wearing. But the body is retrieved and is taken back, and we continue with the story, and we come to the last book of this session, which is Achilles' armor. And the greater part of the book, as you can see at the very end, 40%, almost half of the book, is devoted to this shield that represents, again, everything that's happened up to this point in the Iliad. It represents the world. It represents the Iliad. So on the shield, you have everything that represents good in life and bad in life. You have war and peace. This is called an ekphrasis. An ekphrasis is visualizing in writing a piece of painting by talking about it. And so what you have in the shield are static scenes that come to life. So that you're visualizing what is actually the world is like. I have, that's the shield. You can see it can get complicated. It has 4 concentric circles. The Greeks believed that the world is surrounded by the river ocean. And then inside each circle, certain things happen. If you start from the beginning there, the middle, after you have the sky and the sea and the sun and the moon, then you have the city at war and the city at peace, and that's the larger part of the shield. Most of the 400 or so lines that are devoted to describing the shield have to do with a city at war and a city at peace, which is the Iliad. The city at war is the Iliad, and what peace would be like. And then you go on to talking about sacrifice, talking about the various seasons, autumn, summer, spring, winter, what happens during those seasons, etc. As I say, describing the world. The picture on this side is a representation of the shield, if you had the images that he talks about. There are other things that This also concludes the promise of Zeus to Thetis at this point. From this point on, for the rest of the Iliad, the Greeks are going to be on top. Zeus has kept his promise, so he walks away. Once he walks away, we know that the Trojans cannot win. And we know this because in the previous book, where Zeus is helping them out, 40 different times in the previous book, we're told that Hector is winning because Zeus wills it so. So you don't mistake that Hector is that great on his own. If it wasn't for Zeus, he wouldn't be willing. And so the narrator repeats it 40 different times in one book. So once Zeus walks away, as he will now, he's going to order the gods to stay out completely. And then he's going to tell them, go ahead and join the battle if you want. Help out your own side. And we have the war of the gods also, because that becomes a burlesque of sort. Because the gods can't get hurt. So even though they get wounded and they cry about it, the wound heals immediately. Nothing happens. Nothing goes wrong. It's at this point that Achilles also learns of Patroclus' death. Another friend comes to report this, very touching. And then what we're going to have, we're going to digress again. We're going to keep the story going for another number of books. We still have 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. We're going to do this by taking time out to honor Patroclus in funeral games. Homer's going to find ways of going into other things to hold back for the big moment when he and Achilles meet. And again, he's going to tease you. They're going to meet, but nothing is going to happen. The gods are going to prevent them from getting together till the very end, before the story ends. So that's where we're at. Next time is the last of these books. I put this slide up there. It tells you something about the 50 days of Ilium that I have as a background to these slides, and about this artist that did this. But this is it. This is the end of this session. Any questions?
Yeah.
Huh? Have 10 minutes.
Does Ajax have another name?
Who?
Ajax.
Yeah, in Greek the name is Aias, A-I-A-S.
Okay.
Ajax is the Latin name.
Okay, that's why I can't find it.
Yeah.
Can you remind us of the meaning of the word aristea?
Aristia, yeah. That means excellent, aristocrat, to do something that really brings out the type of warrior you are. So that's why all the major warriors have an aristia in the Iliad, either an entire book or part of a book. And that aristia not only shows their excellence in battle, but as I said, it tells you something about the people themselves, the warrior themselves, their psychology, by the way they fight, the similes that are used to describe their fighting, the accoutrements that they wear, all speak to their character. And that's how you get to know them, yes.
You may have covered this, but how many people at that time read this work? What percentage, and what was it a class thing, and what percentage was aware of it, and what percentage was going about their day not having a clue?
Yeah, initially they would have heard of it because there wasn't any writing. So up from the 7th century BCE, when it was composed, up to about the 5th century, it would have been heard. And there were contests. In Athens, there were contests that lasted 3 days where they read, or they recited, rather, the entire Iliad, as it was known then. So they knew it.
Was everybody there when it was being recited?
Yeah, it's a patriarchal society, so I don't know in the audience how many women were allowed. It's still a question today. if any, were allowed at these gatherings, or maybe some were allowed, but it was mostly men. But there were stories, because by the 5th century, the Iliad and the Odyssey were appearing on vases, in pictures, in poems. Pindar wrote about them. Archilochus, another poet, wrote about them. All the poets of the 7th and the 6th century BCE use Homer as their main theme. So Homer was everywhere, in everyday life, in everything they saw. So these were, if they hadn't heard of the story itself, they knew parts of it. They knew the myths of the story. Okay?
In the illustrations, your slides, there were words sort of penciled in and then maybe inked.
Yeah.
Did you choose which parts of that were
I
on each slide?
used all the, like that.
Yes,
That's part of it. That actually says Cassandra.
okay.
It's written Cassandra there. It's not the whole canvas. They're huge canvases, 10 feet by something, by 12 or something. So, and that's part of it.
That looks
That's
like
the
the
red
blood
that
of the
represents the blood, the force, the fire. But what the artist does usually, he scribbles.
Yeah.
That says Achilles up there. And down there it has names of other, I think, like Athena and other little words. And usually he makes, when he makes the letters pointed like this, here, this represents almost the force, a sexual symbol, maybe a penis, the way it is, the force of Achilles. And he does other things of that nature, and he puts words and then he gets rid of them, or he has, in some places, he does clouds, which he says the dark cloud is Achilles, then comes Hector, then comes, I forget who the other one is, Patroclus, the dark cloud. He has a whole theory, but when you look at it, it actually looks very childish. And people say, oh, my kindergartner can do that. But it is well thought out. And when you read, there are books on Twombly that have been written to describe his art. And this was his masterpiece. And it happens to be in Philadelphia, which is of interest. Yes.
Since it was one oral tradition, there must have been a variety of versions of
Yes.
the Iliad. When was it that you sort of got to the now authorized, in a
Yeah.
sense, version?
Not till the 2nd century BC.
BC.
Yeah, there were 3 scholars, Xenodotus, Aristophanes, not the Aristophanes of the comedies, another Aristophanes, and Aristarchus. Those 3 scholars of that century, from the 3rd to the 2nd, were the ones responsible for collecting the various versions and trying to put together those versions that appeared the most times in the oral society, just like the Old Testament was put together. You're collecting these various stories and you're saying, this one seems to be represented 50% of the time, this one is 20%, so we're going to use the 50%. But what happens if you have 2 that are 50 and 50? Well, you use them both. So you're reading the Bible and you find out that sometimes, as I said in the first lecture, the creation of man, is it from the rib of Adam or is it from a handful of dirt? Well, these are 2 different versions that were around about the same amount of times. So you use both. And you do this for the Iliad too. You can still see some translations that have alternatives. Now, in modern scholarship, what they do, the one that I remember is by a British scholar, Anthony Verite, who, when he comes across a version that might have been a little different, he puts it in brackets,
Oh.
but he includes it. But the Vulgate, the version that everybody uses, didn't come around till around the 15th century AD. So that's the one we use today. That was finally finalized in writing.
Who decided?
Scholars,
So
the scholars that put these things together, especially the three that I just mentioned, they decided. Anything else? Okay,
Thank
see you
you.
next time.